Welcome to the Veil of Truth, your gateway to uncovering hidden insights and illuminating mysteries. I'm thrilled you've joined our global community. Whether you're watching from a bustling city skyline or a quiet countryside, we're glad you're here. Globe showing Europe, Africa, so tell me, where are you tuning in from today? Chapter 1: The Journey into the Hills. The motorcar shuddered like an old kettle on the boil as it climbed the winding mountain road. Hercule Poirot, who valued comfort almost as much as order and symmetry, sat with his gloved hands neatly folded upon his lap, trying with dignified restraint not to wince each time the tires hit a stone. The afternoon light had begun to fade, and a soft amber glow settled over the valley below, making the scattered cottages appear like small chess pieces on a vast board. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, as the car lurched rather violently. "If we continue upward like this, I shall arrive at the village in a condition most unbecoming." The driver, a young local fellow with a cheerful ignorance of potholes, laughed loudly. "Nearly there, sir. Highmore Edge is just ahead." Highmore Edge. The remote hill village that Dr. Lydia Farnham had written about in her letter, urgent, short, and rather cryptic. Poirot had not seen the doctor in nearly 8 years, not since she worked at a London surgery where he had once consulted her regarding a victim's medical records. Her letter, written in her precise and scholarly hand, contained only these words: "Poirot, your skill is needed. A suspicious death has occurred. The authorities are dismissive. I trust no one else. Please come at once." She had signed it simply, Lydia Farnham, M.D. Poirot, who valued trust as one of the rarest and most fragile gifts, had not hesitated. And now, as the car pulled into the narrow lane of Highmore Edge, he lifted his eyes toward the surrounding peaks, tall, jagged silhouettes rising like dark sentinels against the colored sky. The village itself was tiny, a ribbon of stone cottages, a solitary inn with smoke drifting from its chimney, and a modest church whose bell tower leaned slightly to one side as though tired of standing upright. Chickens pecked at the dirt road. A dog barked lazily. The air smelled of pine, cold stone, and something earthy that reminded Poirot of old wood. He stepped out of the car with deliberate elegance, straightened his cuffs, and adjusted his hat. Even in the roughest terrain, Hercule Poirot presented himself impeccably. Inside the inn, Dr. Lydia Farnham rose at once to greet him. Her face, once composed and youthful, now bore faint lines of worry beneath her spectacles. She extended her hand warmly. "Poirot, you came." "Thank you." "My dear doctor," he replied, bowing slightly, "when a lady writes to me with such urgency, I do not delay. Tell me, what is the matter here that requires the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot?" She gestured for him to sit beside the fire. "It is the death of Elias Rowan." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "I do not recall the name." "A woodcutter. Lived alone. Not well liked but not hated either. 2 days ago, a villager found him dead inside his mountain hut, a small jhonpri near the ridge. The local constable insists he slipped, fell, and struck his head. Case closed." She paused. "But he is wrong." Poirot leaned forward slightly. "You are certain?" Dr. Farnham nodded briskly. "I examined the body. The wound is not consistent with a fall. And the interior of the hut contains signs, small signs, that something is amiss." "Ah," Poirot breathed, his eyes sharpening with interest. "Tell me first how you came to be involved." "I was called to confirm death," she explained. "The villagers trust me more than the constable. Many believe it was murder. They whisper about motives, enemies, secrets. Small communities are full of such stories." "A gossip is often the path to truth," Poirot remarked. "But let us begin with facts. Who discovered the body?" "A shepherd boy named Lyle. He had gone up the ridge for his flock and noticed the hut door partly open. Poirot stood Then, Dr. Farnham, may we visit this place? I wish to observe the scene with my own eyes before the night falls fully. The path up the ridge was steep, narrow, and littered with stones. Dr. Farnham walked briskly, while Poirot followed at a more measured pace, careful not to scuff his polished shoes. The wind picked up as they ascended, carrying with it the faint scent of damp pine and something metallic. "You must be cautious," Dr. Farnham called back. "The weather can change quickly here." Poirot nodded, though inwardly he questioned why anyone would choose to live in such a cold, windswept region. As they climbed higher, the village disappeared behind them, replaced by a vast expanse of rolling slopes and dark pines. At last, the jhonpri came into view. Perched near the edge of the ridge, it looked like a lonely tooth jutting out of the mountainside. Its thatched roof sagged under the weight of age, and its wooden door creaked mournfully in the wind. Poirot immediately felt a strange sensation, an awareness that the hut was not merely old or abandoned, but heavy with the residue of recent human fear. Dr. Farnham pushed open the door. There. That is where he lay. Poirot entered, taking in the scene with meticulous precision. The hut was small, scarcely more than 4 paces across. A simple cot, a wooden stool, a few tools on the wall, a lantern tipped on its side, and a broken walking stick near the center. Poirot crouched near the place where Elias's body had been, examining every inch with grave attention. He touched nothing, yet saw everything. "The lantern is unbroken," he murmured. "Yet it lies upon its side. Curious." He moved to the window. And here, upon the frame, he plucked something delicately between his fingers. A single thread. Red. It does not belong to the furnishings of this humble hut. Outside, he inspected the ground. The pine needles were disturbed. Footprints overlapped one another, some deep, some faint. "This is not the scene of an accident," he said quietly. "It is a tableau, deliberate, arranged, but imperfectly so." Dr. Farnham exhaled. "I knew it." Poirot stood in the doorway, looking out at the vast stretch of mountains bathed in dusk. The wind tugged at his coat and whispered secrets he could not yet interpret. "Doctor," he said softly, "the murderer walks among your villagers. And he believes himself safe." He turned, eyes gleaming with careful resolve. But he has not yet met Hercule Poirot. Chapter 2, Clues Among the Pines. The following morning dawned pale and brittle, as though the mountains themselves were reluctant to wake from the night's icy hold. A thin layer of mist clung to the slopes surrounding Heimer Edge, curling around the pines like ghostly fingers. Hercule Poirot, despite the chill, stepped outside the inn promptly at 8 o'clock. He carried no overcoat, only a neatly pressed grey suit that somehow remained spotless even amidst mountain dust. He breathed deeply, lifting his chin. "Fresh air is admirable," he said softly, "but I prefer it in moderation." He set off up the trail leading toward the ridge. His pace was dignified but steady. He paused often, observing the ground, measuring footprints with his eyes, noting where the morning dew had been disturbed and where it had not. Poirot believed nature itself was a witness. One must simply learn to listen. By the time he reached the jhonpri, the mist had begun to thin, revealing the hut in clearer form. Its fragile roof seemed even more precarious in daylight, as though one hard gust could send it tumbling down the slope. Poirot paused before entering. He crouched, fingers hovering just above the earth. "Fresh footprints," he murmured. "Smaller than those of Elias Rowan. And recent, less than 12 hours old." They led from the path to the hut and lingered near the doorway, as though their owner had hesitated before going inside. He rose slowly, his knees complaining more than he would ever admit aloud. "Someone revisited the scene of the crime," he said. "Why? To retrieve something? Or to ensure something remained hidden?" Inside the hut, Poirot examined everything again, but this time with sharper scrutiny. The broken walking stick lay exactly where it had the night before. He held it delicately. Snapped in the center. The break is clean, a forceful, intentional act, not the result of a fall. He looked toward the lantern. Still not broken, he whispered. A curious oversight if one wishes to stage disorder. Poirot stepped back, folding his arms. The hut spoke to him in whispers, small inconsistencies, faint impressions, telltale signs of human behavior attempting, poorly, to mimic chance. But it was the red thread that captured his attention most vividly. He took it from his pocket, holding it up to the morning light. Wool. Fine quality. Not the garment of a poor woodcutter. Someone had been here, someone with means, or at least with clothing far superior to Elias Rowan's own rough attire. Satisfied that he had gathered all he could from the hut for now, Poirot descended the ridge to begin his next task, meeting the villagers. Human nature, more often than not, revealed the truth faster than footprints. His first encounter occurred just beyond the tree line. A young woman stood by a fallen log, a basket of herbs at her feet. Her pale face, framed by dark hair, looked tired, haunted, even. Clara Rowan? Poirot inquired gently. She startled at the sound of her name. Why, yes. Who are you? I am Hercule Poirot. I investigate the death of your father. Her eyes widened in fear before she composed herself, clasping her hands tightly. I don't know anything about it. Poirot watched the tremor in her fingers, the way she avoided his gaze, her uneven breathing. Mademoiselle, he said softly, fear is natural. It does not make one guilty. Clara swallowed hard. I didn't go near his hut. I haven't spoken to him in days. Father and I, we didn't get along. Did someone else go to him recently? She hesitated, a pause far too long to be innocent. I don't know, she whispered. Poirot did not press yet. Instead, he inclined his head with courteous finality. Merci, mademoiselle. As she hurried away, Poirot noted the anxiety in her steps. She was hiding something, perhaps not murder, but something. A little farther down the trail, Poirot spotted Jonah Blythe, a massive shepherd with a thick beard and shoulders broad enough to block the path. He leaned heavily on his staff, regarding Poirot with open hostility. You're the detective from down south, Jonah growled. Come to stir trouble. I come only to find truth, monsieur. Jonah snorted. Truth is, Elias Rowan died the way he lived, clumsy and drunk. And yet, Poirot replied mildly, you disliked him greatly, did you not? Jonah's jaw tightened. The man owed me money. And he owed others. Lied, cheated, dodged debts. Good riddance, I say. Where were you the night he died? With my flock, Jonah snapped. Ask anyone. Poirot observed his posture, the tightness around his mouth, the way his eyes flickered toward the mountains. Jonah was angry, deeply so, but anger alone did not equal guilt. Before Poirot could speak again, Jonah spat on the ground and stomped off, muttering curses. Poirot stood very still, hands behind his back. Too forceful in speech, he murmured. This one hides something also, but not the murder. The last of the three people he sought was Dr. Lydia Farnham. He found her near the village edge, packing medical supplies into her satchel before beginning her morning rounds. She smiled faintly at his approach. You've begun interrogating the villagers, I see. Interviews, doctor, he corrected gently. Interrogations are for those already guilty. She chuckled, though her eyes were clouded with fatigue. And what do you make of them so far? That they lie to themselves as much as to others. Dr. Farnham nodded slowly. This place is full of secrets, Poirot. I fear many were relieved at Elias's death. And you? Poirot asked, watching her carefully. I had no strong feelings about the man, she replied. Only suspicion when I examined the wound. It was not an accident. Someone stood close to him when he died. Poirot admired her clarity. And you, Doctor, your presence near the hut was legitimate. Entirely, she said without hesitation. I went when summoned. Nothing more. Poirot studied her eyes, firm, calm, unwavering. She was truthful, but perhaps not telling all she knew. When she walked away, Poirot whispered to himself, every clue is a thread, and the tapestry is still hidden. Later, back in the village, Poirot visited the shopkeeper, an elderly woman with sharp eyes and sharper memory. As she poured tea, she leaned closer. They say a stranger was on the ridge the night Elias died, she whispered dramatically. Wearing a red scarf. Poirot stilled. A red scarf, madam? Oh yes, she said eagerly. Fancy foreign wool. Not local. Several villagers saw him. Poirot smiled slowly, an elegant, meaningful smile. The thread. The footprints. The intentional staging. A stranger had indeed been near the hut. But strangers, Poirot knew, were rarely as unknown as they first appeared. He lifted his teacup with careful grace. Now, he murmured, the mountain begins to speak. Chapter 3, The Lockbox and the Village Gossip. The clouds had begun their slow gathering over Highmyedge by the time Hercule Poirot finished his morning investigations. A thin drizzle pattered against the inn's windows as he returned, prompting him to remove his hat and brush away a stray droplet from its brim with great delicacy. He disliked rain. It dampened not only one's clothing but also one's sense of order. Nevertheless, he stepped inside the warmth of the inn with a controlled sigh. The hearth crackled gently, filling the common room with a glow that contrasted strongly against the grey world outside. Poirot ordered a cup of hot chocolate, the only beverage he claimed brought both comfort and clarity, and sat at a small corner table. No sooner had the steaming cup arrived than the door swung open, ushering in a gust of cold wind and a burst of village chatter. 3 elderly women entered, their shawls pulled tightly around them, their voices bright with excitement. They spotted Poirot immediately. Nothing was more irresistible to the people of small villages than a stranger with a purpose, and no stranger was more intriguing than a detective. The women approached him as a flock would encircle a morsel of bread. "Good morning, sir," said the oldest of them, Mrs. Pendleton, with a curtsy far too elaborate for a mountain inn. "We hear you're looking into poor Elias Rowan's death." Poirot inclined his head politely. "I seek only the truth, madam." "And truth is hard to find in this village," Mrs. Pendleton said with dramatic flair, lowering her voice. "Especially where Elias was concerned." The second woman, Mrs. Blythe, no relation to Jonah Blythe, leaned in eagerly. "Do you know he kept a wooden box? Locked tight, it was. Never let anyone near it." "A lockbox?" Poirot asked, eyebrows lifting. "Oh yes," Mrs. Pendleton confirmed. "Said it contained money. Though I say it was more likely secrets. And now that he's gone, poof, the box has vanished." Poirot took a thoughtful sip of his chocolate. "Vanished, you say?" "Gone," the third woman added gravely. "Just like that. Constable Briggs says Elias must have hidden it away, but we know better." "We certainly do," Mrs. Pendleton said. "Someone took it. And if someone took it, they likely killed him for it," Mrs. Blythe finished triumphantly. Poirot listened without interruption. He knew gossip could distort truth as easily as it revealed it, but it often pointed in the right direction, even if crookedly. "And tell me, mesdames," Poirot asked, "who might have desired this box?" They exchanged glances, those long, loaded looks that speak of shared suspicion. "Well," Mrs. Pendleton murmured meaningfully. Jonah Blythe, for one. Elias owed him. And Clara, Mrs. Blythe added. Poor thing. Her father never gave her a penny. And perhaps Dr. Farnham too, whispered the third. She visited that hut more often than a doctor should. Poirot raised a hand gently. That is enough speculation for now, ladies. You have all been most helpful. They left him with the satisfied air of women who believed they had advanced justice itself. Poirot stared into the fire for a moment, turning their words over in his mind. Asterisk asterisk a missing locked box. Possibly money. Possibly secrets. And everyone knew of it. Asterisk asterisk. But would a murderer leave the hut empty-handed if theft was the motive? Poirot doubted it. Later that afternoon, he strolled into the village shop, a tiny establishment cluttered with jars, tins, bolts of cloth, and the sort of odds and ends that could outfit an entire community without ever restocking. The shopkeeper, Mrs. Elspeth Hardy, stood behind the counter polishing a row of ginger jars. She looked up immediately. Ah, the detective. And the woman who knows all that passes in Hymel Edge, Poirot said, bowing slightly. Mrs. Hardy gave a modest shrug, though her eye sparkled. One hears things. Then perhaps you may tell me what you heard most recently. The shopkeeper folded her arms. Everyone is speaking of Elias Rowan. They say he was sitting on something, information, valuables, who knows? But people feared him as much as they resented him. And the locked box? Poirot prompted. Mrs. Hardy lowered her voice. Real enough. I saw it once when he bought flour. He kept it close. But the night before he died, he was heard arguing, shouting, actually, with someone near the mountain trail. Poirot leaned closer. Who? She hesitated. A stranger. Not from here. Tall. Well-dressed. Wearing a red scarf. Poirot's fingers tightened slightly on his cane. The man with the red scarf, he repeated. Yes. A traveller staying in a rented room near the village edge. She sniffed. Says he's here to write a book. But I've never known a writer to wander the mountains at night. Did you see him yesterday? He came in for bread. Purchased it with a half smile I didn't trust. Poirot thanked her and continued walking through the village, pondering this mysterious stranger. Why would a man with fine clothing and a red scarf roam near the hut the night before Elias's death? Why argue with a woodcutter he supposedly did not know? Red was a bold color. A careless one for a murderer. Unless the murderer wanted to be noticed. Or wanted only certain people to notice. As evening settled, Poirot returned to the inn, where the fire had once again become the center of village life. Several locals sat near it, cards in hand, drinks on the table, and tongues loosened by warmth. Poirot sat at his corner and quietly observed. Clara Rowan entered briefly, purchasing a loaf before slipping out again, her eyes downcast. Jonah Blythe stomped in next, dripping rain, muttering about the storm. Dr. Farnham arrived shortly after, speaking with calm purpose to the innkeeper about supplies. Each person carried tension in their posture. Each avoided the eyes of the others. Poirot found himself suddenly, delicately smiling. In this tiny village, every person was like a small cog in a tightly wound clock. Remove one, and the entire mechanism faltered. Add pressure, and the gears began to grind audible complaints. Yes, something was hidden here. Not only in Elias Rowan's hut, but in the hearts of those who still breathed. As the fire dimmed and the room grew quieter, Poirot's gaze landed on the door just as it opened. A tall man stepped in, removing a hat that had once been fashionable and shaking off raindrops with theatrical ease. He wore a long coat, fine quality. And around his neck hung a red wool scarf. He scanned the room, his eyes pausing briefly on Poirot before he approached the counter as though he belonged in a drawing room rather than a mountain inn. Poirot rose slowly, fastening his gloves. "It seems," he murmured to himself, "that the stranger has finally arrived." And with that, he crossed the room to introduce himself to the man who, knowingly or not, had already woven himself into the mystery surrounding Elias Rowan's death. Chapter 4: Secrets in the Smokehouse. The rain rolled in overnight, sliding down the roof of the mountain hut in long, shimmering curtains. Morning came reluctantly, grey and muted, as though the sky itself felt reluctant to reveal what further truths waited to be uncovered. Hercule Poirot sat at the small wooden table, sipping a cup of tea that Maria insisted was the strongest brew this side of the ridge. He appreciated her attempt at hospitality, but even she could not hide the tremor in her hand as she placed the pot down. Between the steam of the tea and the mist curling outside, the world felt insular, trapped, much like the small collection of people who had gathered around the dead beekeeper's hut. "Madame Maria," Poirot said gently, "you did not sleep well, I think." She shook her head. "Who could sleep, monsieur? There is murder in the valley. And when murder comes once, it seldom travels alone." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "An interesting belief." "Ask the elders," she replied. "When trouble arrives up here, it clings." Before he could respond, Detective Farouk entered the hut, brushing rain off his coat. His usually sharp manner was softened by fatigue, and the notebook in his hand was damp around the edges. "Poirot," he said, "you wanted to examine the smokehouse behind Ashraf's hut before the others arrived. Best do it now." Poirot nodded, set down his cup, and took up his walking cane. Together, they stepped outside. The path was slippery, but Poirot moved with careful precision, ensuring not one step splashed mud upon his immaculate trousers. The smokehouse stood a short distance away, a squat round structure built of dark stones. From the outside, it looked ordinary enough, though the wooden door bore fresh scratch marks, deep, uneven, and recent. Farouk grimaced. "Could be animals." Poirot studied the marks. None. Too controlled. Too deliberate. Someone tried to force the lock, and with some haste. Farouk approached the door and opened it. A rush of cool, smoky air drifted out, carrying the scent of dried meat and pinewood. Poirot followed him in. Inside, the smokehouse was dim, lit only by the thin daylight squeezing through a small square window. Racks hung on the walls, most of them empty now, though a few strips of dried mutton remained. Ashraf had used the space recently, there was no doubt. But Poirot's attention drifted to the floor. "Farouk," he said quietly, "observe." On the ground, half hidden under a fallen rack, lay a small wooden box. Its lid was ajar, and its contents spilled partly onto the dirt floor. It was filled with folded slips of paper. Poirot nodded once. Someone knew this box existed. Someone feared its discovery. Farouk rubbed his temples. So Ashraf was keeping notes, possibly secrets, and someone else was going through trouble to hide them. Poirot's eyes glittered. Exactly. He took another note from the box. This one was crumpled and stained, the handwriting shaky. "You promise me? If it becomes known, we are both finished." Farouk whistled. "This is getting deeper." Poirot gave him a long, thoughtful look. "Tell me, my friend, what connects a beekeeper, a secret lockpick, and frightened messages?" "Blackmail," Farouk suggested. "Perhaps. But it could also be fear. Or guilt." Poirot closed the box and stood elegantly. "We must speak to our suspects again. Particularly Mr. Idris." Farouk stiffened. "You think he?" Poirot lifted a hand. "I think he lies. That is enough." As they exited the smokehouse, the mist had thickened, swallowing the valley in a cold embrace. The sound of footsteps approached from the main hut. It was Idris, his walking stick tapping sharply against the stones. His expression was tighter than the day before, eyes bloodshot, jaw clenched. "There you are," he said, trying too hard to sound casual. "Maria said you were snooping about." Poirot smiled pleasantly. "Investigating, Monsieur Idris. Not snooping. It is quite different. One is precise, elegant. The other, messy." Idris ignored the remark. "Is this necessary? The villagers are frightened. Better to leave it to the authorities." Farouk bristled. "I am the authority." Idris hesitated, then dipped his head. "I only meant, things get complicated when outsiders poke into old matters." Poirot stepped lightly toward him. "Old matters, you say? But we investigate a new murder. Why speak of the old?" Idris's lips tightened. "Slip of the tongue." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Ah, mais oui. Many slips happen when truth tries to escape." Idris gripped his walking stick so tightly the knuckles whitened. "If you're accusing me of something—" "I accuse no one," Poirot said smoothly. "I only observe. You have been uneasy since the discovery of Ashraf's body." Idris's face darkened. "I knew him for years. Anyone would be uneasy. But not everyone," Poirot said softly, "would try to erase footprints in the mud near the ridge." Idris froze. Farouk stepped forward. "What footprints?" Poirot's voice remained calm. "Yesterday, when we found the body, the footprints near it had been deliberately smudged. Someone returned to disturb the scene. They used a branch to drag across the ground." Idris trembled. I was only trying to help." "How?" Poirot asked, his tone silk. "By destroying evidence." Idris's breath stuttered. "You don't understand, Ashraf was into something dangerous. I didn't want it spreading." Poirot leaned closer. "Then tell us." "Because right now, Monsieur Idris, your silence makes you look very much afraid." Idris's shoulders sagged. "I can't. If I speak, others will suffer." Poirot studied him. "Perhaps. But someone already has." Idris glanced at the mist-shrouded ridge, eyes distant and haunted. "You don't know what you're dealing with, Monsieur Poirot. Ashraf's death is only one part of the story." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Then enlighten us." Idris swallowed, hesitated, and turned away. "I need time," he whispered. "Tonight. Meet me at the old granary at dusk. I'll tell you everything." Poirot and Farouk exchanged a glance. Another meeting. Another promise of truth. Another shadow cast over the valley. Poirot murmured, "So the secrets begin to reveal themselves, but will they arrive before another tragedy?" He watched Idris vanish into the mist, feeling the tension knot around the mountainside like a tightening rope. And Poirot knew. Tonight, something would break. Chapter 5: The Man Who Did Not Arrive. The mountain swallowed the day quickly, letting dusk creep in long before its usual hour. By late afternoon, the valley felt wrapped in a bruised purple haze. Hercule Poirot stood just outside the hut, adjusting his coat collar against the chill. The clouds clung low, and every distant sound, the snap of a twig, the rustle of a branch, seemed sharpened by the gathering darkness. Detective Farouk approached from the footpath, lantern in hand. "Granary's about a 10-minute walk from here," he said. "I posted 2 constables nearby. If Idris tries anything clever, we'll see it." Poirot gave a small nod. "Excellent precautions. But remember, mon ami, the man who is cornered is often the most unpredictable." Farooq sighed. You really think he'll talk? I think, Poirot said, that he is a man with secrets too heavy for his conscience. And secrets, like moisture in these mountains, always find a way to seep through. They began the walk toward the old granary, moving carefully along the narrow trail. The fog thickened with each step, swallowing the world in pale grey layers, until only their lantern flicker pierced the gloom. The air smelled of pine and damp earth. Birds had long retreated to their nests, leaving the valley unnervingly silent. Poirot walked slowly, meticulously, his keen eyes scanning the ground. The path was wet, soft, and full of impressions. What are you looking for? Farooq murmured. Nature tells its story, my friend, Poirot replied softly. If one takes the time to read. Just ahead, Poirot stopped. Kneeling with surprising grace, he tapped the ground with his cane. A footprint, he said. Deep. Recent. And belonging to a boot larger than Idris's. Farooq frowned. Constables, maybe. Poirot shook his head. No. The constables were instructed to remain near the granary, not here, midway on the trail. He stood slowly, dusting his gloves. Someone else walked to the granary. And not long before us. They exchanged a tense glance. By the time they reached the granary, light had faded almost completely. The constables approached, saluting quickly. Sir, one said, no one's entered or exited since we arrived. Poirot arched a brow. And when did you arrive? Half an hour ago, sir. Poirot turned to Farooq. Idris said he would meet us at dusk. He should be here already. Farooq lifted the lantern and stepped toward the granary door. The building, a relic of past farming days, leaned against the hillside like a tired giant. Its roof sagged, and its wooden beams were dark with age and mildew. A faint, sharp smell hung around the edges, dust, grain, and something else. Something metallic. Poirot followed him inside. The interior was dim, creaking under its own weight. Slivers of moonlight slipped through cracks in the walls, forming thin beams that illuminated floating dust. Old sacks of grain lay piled in corners. Rusted tools hung from hooks. Farooq swept the lantern around. Idris was not here. But Poirot's eyes had already fixed on the ground. Farooq, he said softly, bring the light. Farooq turned the lantern toward the far wall. And both men froze. Leaning against a stack of sacks, half sitting, half collapsed, was Idris. His head slumped forward. His walking stick lay inches from his hand. Farooq rushed to him. Idris! Can you hear me? Poirot was calmer, moving with slow precision. He placed 2 fingers against Idris's neck, though the result was already clear. Illinois ist mort, Poirot said quietly. He is dead. Farooq cursed under his breath. Another murder? Here, right under our noses. Poirot knelt beside the body. Idris's shirt collar was tugged aside, showing deep bruising around the throat. He was strangled, Poirot murmured. And quite recently. Farooq ran a frustrated hand through his hair. Constables said no one came in. Poirot raised a finger. No one after they arrived. But he was killed before. Farooq clenched his jaw. Then whoever followed him on the path. Was not Idris, Poirot finished. It was his killer. Poirot examined Idris's hands next. No dirt under the nails. No signs of struggle. He trusted the person, Poirot whispered. Or at least, did not fear them until it was too late. Farooq shook his head. So he asked for a meeting and walked straight into his murderer's hands. Poirot stood, glancing around the granary. But what did he intend to tell us? He scanned the room again, slowly, methodically. Something had caught his eye earlier. He moved toward a large wooden beam near the back wall. There, almost invisible in the dim light, was a slip of folded paper wedged between two boards. A message. Poirot removed it gently, opening it with careful fingers. Just two words were scrawled in messy, hurried writing. The honey. Farouk stared. That's it? The honey. Poirot nodded slowly. It is a clue, but incomplete. He tapped the paper thoughtfully. Idris wished to reveal something concerning Ashraf's honey. Something dangerous. Farouk frowned. Could be smuggling? Rare honey fetches a high price. Poirot shook his head. No. Idris spoke of ruin. Of fear. Of others suffering. This is not about money. Farouk sighed. What then? Poirot pocketed the note. We must consider all possibilities. He stepped outside the granary, inhaling the cold mountain air. His eyes drifted across the valley, where the huts lay tiny in the mist. Someone here, he said softly, is desperate to keep their secret hidden. Farouk joined him. And now we've got two bodies. The villagers will panic. Poirot's jaw tightened. Then we must act swiftly. Before fear drives someone to do what they would never normally consider. They began walking back toward the main lodge. The fog pressed close, and night settled heavy. Halfway down the trail, Poirot paused again, turning his head sharply. Did you hear that? He whispered. Farouk held his breath. A faint crack. A rustle. Movement in the trees above them. Poirot's voice dropped to a murmur. We are being followed. They continued walking, pretending not to notice. Poirot's cane tapped smoothly as always, but his mind raced. Someone had been at the granary before them. Someone had killed Idris. Someone knew Idris planned to talk. And that someone was now watching their every step. When they reached the lodge, Poirot closed the door behind them with deliberate care. Maria looked up, her hands gripping her apron. You found him, didn't you? Poirot met her eyes. Yes. Monsieur Idris is dead. Her face paled. Then it is beginning again. Beginning again? Poirot repeated slowly. Maria froze, but only for a heartbeat. I only meant the danger. It spreads. Poirot studied her, filing away the tremor in her voice. Tonight, the mountain had claimed another life. But Poirot felt it, deep in the quiet chambers of his mind. He was closer now. The threads were weaving together. And the killer, whoever they were, was beginning to make mistakes. Chapter 6: Shadows and Confessions. The following morning dawned clear, though the mist still clung stubbornly to the valleys and gullies below Heimer Edge. Hercule Poirot awoke early, as was his habit, and dressed meticulously in his grey suit, polished shoes, and perfectly starched collar. He did not speak of the deaths to anyone yet, preferring instead to study the unfolding events from a distance, as a chess master observes the board before making his next move. Detective Farouk, already awake, waited with his notebook. I've been talking with the villagers, he said. They're anxious. Nobody slept well last night. There are whispers of a curse or mountain spirits. Poirot smiled faintly, pressing his gloved hands together. Mysterious forces do not kill, my friend. Only human passions and errors. Farouk nodded, though his eyes betrayed unease. The two men departed the lodge, walking carefully toward the ridge where Elias Rowan's jhonpri and the Granary had claimed lives over the last few days. The early sun glinted off wet pine needles, making them sparkle deceptively, like tiny shards of glass. This place, Farouk murmured, it feels heavy. Indeed, Poirot agreed. The air itself carries memory. And memory can hide more than any wall or lock. Returning to the scene, Poirot began at the jhonpri once more. Inside, the floor showed traces of yesterday's investigation, the faint impressions of footprints, the disturbed ground where Idris had been found. The broken walking stick, the tipped lantern, the red wool thread from the visitor, everything remained as he had seen it, yet somehow it felt more urgent now. He knelt, studying the earth carefully, measuring the angle of the impressions, the direction in which the dirt had been scraped. "Observe," Poirot said, pointing to faint drag marks leading toward the corner of the hut. Someone moved something, or someone, after the original crime. Perhaps the murderer returned to ensure nothing was left behind. Farouk frowned. "You think the killer came back twice?" Poirot nodded. "Yes. And consider this, the killer was confident, yet careless. He, or she, left a red thread, a trace that would betray them to one patient enough to notice. It is always those small, arrogant details that unravel the truth." Questioning Clara Rowan. Poirot's next step was to speak again with Clara Rowan. She had returned to the hut early, ostensibly to collect firewood, but Poirot suspected she had not come purely for that. "Clara," he said gently, "I wish to speak with you, privately." Her eyes widened, but she followed him without protest. They moved into a small clearing near the edge of the woods, where the pine trees broke enough for them to be unseen. "You seem troubled," Poirot observed. "I do not mean to frighten you, but the little grey cells are very good at discerning fear." Clara hesitated, hands clasped tightly. I cannot understand why all of this is happening. My father, my half-brother Idris, they are both dead. And now, it is as though something is watching us all." Poirot nodded. "Fear is not always bad. Sometimes, it helps one tell the truth." Her lips trembled. "There is a letter. My father, he hid it from me. I found it recently. It contained secrets about Idris, about the family. He refused to let me read it." Poirot's eyes narrowed subtly. "And what did you learn from it?" Clara bit her lip, shaking her head. "I can't tell anyone yet. It's dangerous. That is why I try to keep away. But I suspect someone killed Idris because of it." "Ah," Poirot murmured. "So, the motive is not money. It is knowledge. Secrets. And fear of exposure." Clara nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Yes. I think the killer wanted to hide the truth. Not the box, not the money, but the letters." Poirot smiled faintly. "Excellent. You have been courageous to speak so much, mademoiselle. Keep the rest to yourself until the proper moment. We must not rush the reveal." Examining the ridge. Poirot and Farouk returned to the ridge to inspect the area where Idris had been found. The fog had cleared partially, revealing the dramatic sweep of the mountains. The ridge itself was narrow, the slope sharp, and the ground treacherous. Poirot studied the area systematically. He knelt near the edge, scanning the earth for impressions, marks, and debris. "Here," he said, pointing to a faint scratch in the dirt. Someone stopped abruptly. "And there," he tapped near the ridge's edge, "someone tried to catch their footing." Farouk frowned. "So the killer followed Idris to the granary, then stopped here?" "Possibly," Poirot said. "Or perhaps this is where he or she thought the victim would not survive the fall if pushed. Observe the angle of the marks. They do not align with a fall from the granary. Someone attempted to stage an accident but failed." Poirot's eyes caught a glint among the stones, a small fragment of metal. He picked it up delicately. It was part of a lock mechanism, a tiny but crucial piece. "Ah," he murmured. So the murderer attempted to access a lock, perhaps the box, or perhaps a secret compartment in Idris's belongings. And they left this behind. Farouk's eyes widened. Then the killer is careless. None, Poirot corrected. The killer is impatient. And impatience is more revealing than arrogance. It tells one of urgency, of desperation. The interrogation of Jonah Blythe. By mid-afternoon, Poirot decided it was time to speak again with Jonah Blythe. The shepherd had been largely quiet since Idris's death, tending his flock along the lower slopes. Poirot found him in a small shed where he was sharpening tools. Jonah Blythe, Poirot began politely, "May I have a word?" Jonah grunted, lowering his whetstone. "What do you want now, city man?" "I wish to understand more about your feelings toward Elias Rowan and Idris." Jonah scowled. "Elias owed me money. Big mistake in my life, that man." "Idris?" "I don't know him." "Don't care." "Yet," Poirot observed carefully, "you were seen on the ridge near the jhonpri the night Elias died." Jonah's jaw tightened. "I was tending my sheep. That is all. If someone saw me, let them see." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "Fear can distort perception. But here is what concerns me: footprints were deliberately altered near the hut after the murder. Someone intended to mislead an observer." Jonah's eyes flickered. "I didn't touch anything." Poirot folded his hands. "No. But someone else may have. And you, Monsieur Blythe, were nearby. Observe your reaction." Jonah muttered something incomprehensible and left, slamming the shed door. Poirot smiled faintly. He had gleaned more from Jonah's defensiveness than any admission could have offered. A gathering of clues. By the time evening fell, Poirot had pieced together a tentative chain of events. Elias Rowan had been murdered in the jhonpri. Idris had tried to reveal a secret regarding Ashraf's honey, or perhaps the letters hidden by Elias. Someone had deliberately tampered with footprints and left behind clues, like the red thread and the fragment of lock mechanism. Jonah, while angry, was likely innocent of murder, but had acted suspiciously due to proximity and knowledge of the disputes. Clara possessed knowledge that placed her at the center of the motive, though she was cautious. Poirot reclined slightly in the lodge's common room, sipping his tea. His mind worked like the intricate gears of a clock, turning each piece, each thread, each human hesitation over and over. "There is one constant," he said softly to Farouk, "that all these events reveal: the murderer believes he or she has the advantage. But one misstep is enough for the little grey cells to discover the truth." Farouk sighed. "I wish I had your confidence." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Confidence, mon ami, is merely patience tempered with observation. And patience is a powerful weapon." As night fully descended over Hymou Edge, the inn settled into uneasy quiet. Poirot, staring out the window at the fog-shrouded ridge, whispered to himself, almost in anticipation, "Soon, all threads will be visible. And the murderer will not escape the design of logic and justice. Ah, the little grey cells, they are patient, like the mountains themselves." Outside, the wind stirred, brushing pine needles against the roof. Somewhere in the darkness, a figure watched. And Poirot knew, with that singular certainty that never failed him, that the killer had grown careless. Chapter 7: The Gathering Storm. The night had arrived in earnest over Hymou Edge, draping the village in a heavy cloak of fog and shadow. The inn's hearth struggled against the chill, its flame flickering against the windows like a timid beacon in the surrounding darkness. Hercule Poirot sat in his favorite corner, fingers steepled, eyes bright and alert. The events of the past days had drawn a complex web across the mountains: 2 deaths, a missing box, secret letters, and a mysterious red scarf that had appeared like a thread of crimson among the green and grey of the valley. Detective Farouk entered quietly, his coat damp with mist. It's worse than before, Poirot. The villagers are whispering of curses now. Some refuse to leave their homes after sunset. Poirot nodded. Fear is as contagious as any illness. But tonight, Farouk, it is our duty to illuminate truth amidst the darkness. We are close. A sharp rap at the door interrupted them. Maria entered, carrying a small lantern, her face tense. Monsieur Poirot, someone asked to see you. He says he knows about the murders and fears for his life. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Excellent. Let him in. Perhaps he will help untangle the threads. A stranger comes forward. The man who entered was small, nervous, and pale. He removed his hat hastily, revealing thinning hair damp with mist. Detective Poirot, he began, voice quivering, my name is Rafik. I live near the ridge. I saw things that others have not. Things that might explain the deaths. Poirot gestured to a chair. Sit, Monsieur Rafik. Speak calmly, without fear. Every detail, however small, is important. Rafik swallowed. The night Elias died. I saw a figure in red. A scarf. Moving swiftly near the jhonpri. Then I saw Idris later, meeting someone near the granary. But there was a third person. A shadow, who was not seen by the villagers. Whoever killed Idris? This shadow followed him. I think they might come for me if they knew I spoke. Poirot nodded slowly. Very good. You have observed much. Tell me everything you remember, in order. Rafik's hands trembled as he described the movements near the ridge, the first figure, bold and decisive, tampering near Elias's hut, the second, more hesitant, following Idris, and finally, the shadow, lurking at a distance, ensuring the others fulfilled its unseen plan. Poirot listened carefully, noting the precise times, the spacing, the behavior of the shadow. Ah, yes, he murmured, so the murderer is cautious, but overconfident. Always present, but always hidden. Clever, yet not careful enough. Clara's confession. As the first candlelight flickered across the room, Clara Rowan entered. She was pale, eyes wide, and hands clenched tightly. Poirot, she said, I must speak. I cannot bear it any longer. There are truths I have kept, and they are dangerous. Perhaps they are part of this terrible chain. Poirot gestured calmly. Sit, mademoiselle. You are safe here. Speak without fear. The little grey cells will follow every word. Clara took a deep breath. The letters, my father hid them because they revealed something about Idris. About Ashraf's honey. My father discovered that the honey Idris was selling, so-called rare mountain honey, was sometimes tampered with. Poisoned in small amounts. For sale to the wealthy, only a trace, enough to make someone ill. He tried to confront Idris, but my father feared what would happen if it became known. Idris, he was desperate to protect himself, to cover his tracks. He may have acted to silence my father, though. I cannot be certain he did. But when Idris tried to tell the truth, he was silenced too. Poirot's expression remained calm, but his mind raced, piecing the fragments into the larger tapestry. So, he murmured, the motive is clear, greed, secrecy, and fear of exposure. And the box? The letters. Clara swallowed. The box was meant to contain records. Evidence of the honey tampering. Idris had been trying to protect it. My father had intended to destroy it, or reveal it. Someone wanted to make sure neither succeeded. Poirot leaned back, rubbing his temples slightly. Yes, now the picture becomes clearer. A red scarf. A shadow. 2 murders. And fear, thick as fog, surrounding the ridge. An unexpected visitor. At that moment, a knock came at the door. The innkeeper opened it, revealing Jonah Blythe, dripping from the mist outside. His expression was grim, unlike the scowl he wore in previous days. "I heard about Idris," he said, voice low. I think I know who did it." Poirot's eye sharpened. "Speak, Monsieur Blythe. Every detail is important." Jonah hesitated. "It's not me. I swear it. But the stranger who came days ago, the one with the red scarf. I saw him near the ridge, and he wasn't alone. He carried something small, but heavy. He entered the jhonpri after Elias, and left before the body was found. Then Idris met him, and after that, I never saw the man again." Poirot folded his hands. "Ah, yes. The pieces are beginning to fall into place. And now, Miss Amos, we must consider the shadow, the red scarf, and the heavy object carried. Everything is deliberate, calculated." Farouk muttered, "We've had 2 deaths, letters, a missing box, and now, a mysterious stranger. How can we find him before he strikes again?" Poirot smiled faintly, the way a cat smiles when it knows a mouse is trapped. "Patience, mon ami. The trap is being prepared. The final moves of this game will come swiftly. And the murderer, yes, the murderer believes he is still safe. Soon, he will discover how precarious his position truly is." A plan forms. Poirot spent the next hour outlining his plan. He would use the knowledge of Idris's intended confession, Clara's information, and the accounts of Rafik and Jonah to set a subtle trap. The murderer's overconfidence and impatience would work in their favor. "We will create an opportunity," Poirot explained to Farouk. "A meeting. A chance for the killer to reveal themselves through action. And we shall watch quietly, letting their own fear betray them." Farouk frowned. "And what about the villagers? They must remain unaware. Fear is a tool, but panic is dangerous. Only we, and perhaps Clara, may know the full truth until the moment arrives." Poirot rose, straightening his cuffs. "Tonight, the mountain watches, and so do we. The threads are ready to be pulled, and soon the entire tapestry of truth will be visible. The murderer has grown careless, and even the cleverest cannot escape when all paths converge. The calm before the storm." Outside, the fog had thickened, curling around the inn like ghostly fingers. The valley was quiet, save for the occasional gust rattling the shutters. Poirot stood by the window, gazing toward the ridge, his mind working swiftly. "Observe, Farouk," he murmured. "The murderer believes in the safety of darkness. But darkness is not the ally of truth. We shall illuminate all." Farouk shivered. "And if he strikes tonight?" Poirot's eyes glittered. "Then, mon ami, we shall be ready. For the little grey cells, combined with patience and preparation, always triumph." He turned from the window, calm, composed, almost elegant as always, though the tension of the past days clung to him like a second skin. "Tonight," Poirot said softly, "the mountain holds its breath. And tomorrow, it will reveal the murderer." The wind moaned through the pines, carrying with it whispers of danger, secrets, and treachery. Somewhere, hidden among the shadows, the killer watched, and perhaps, for the first time, realized that their carefully constructed plan might soon unravel. And Poirot, patient and unyielding, waited. Chapter 8: The Little Grey Cells Prevail. The night was still over Heimer Edge, though the wind had softened, leaving only a low, eerie sigh through the pines. Hercule Poirot, seated near the hearth of the inn, sipped his chocolate quietly. His eyes, sharp and luminous, scanned the room, taking in every detail, the nervous glances of villagers, the twitch of a hand, the faint stain on a coat cuff. Detective Farooq stood nearby, leaning against a post, a notebook in hand, looking tense but eager. The last days had tested patience, endurance, and nerves. 2 deaths, secret letters, a missing box, and a mysterious stranger had thrown the entire valley into a state of unease. Yet Poirot's calm was unwavering. "The threads are all in place," he murmured to Farooq. "And now we shall see which one the murderer cannot resist pulling." A meeting in the common room. Poirot had invited all concerned parties to the inn: Clara Rowan, Jonah Blythe, Maria, the 2 remaining villagers who had been closest to Elias and Idris, and even Rafik, the timid witness. They gathered reluctantly in the common room, shivering slightly in the cold, their faces pale with anxiety. Poirot stood, elegant and composed, his gloved hands clasped. "Mesdames et messieurs, thank you for coming. Tonight, we shall uncover the truth behind the deaths that have plagued this mountain valley." He paused, letting the silence settle, his eyes sweeping across the room. 2 men have died. Elias Rowan, a man who kept secrets, and Idris Rowan, who wished to reveal them. Both deaths, I assure you, are connected by a single thread: fear and greed. And the red scarf, the letters, the missing box, all are pieces of the same puzzle. Murmurs rose among the villagers. Poirot raised a hand. "Silence, please. Every detail will soon fall into its proper place." Revealing the clues. Poirot began with the letters. Elias hid documents in a small wooden box, records of tampered honey, meant for wealthy buyers. A trace of poison, subtle enough to make only the strongest and most attentive ill. Idris discovered this, and when he attempted to reveal the truth, he was murdered. He held up a fragment of lock mechanism. The murderer attempted to access Elias's box. Careless, impatient, leaving a tiny piece behind. And the red thread found near the jhonpri? A mark of overconfidence, revealing the identity of the intruder. Poirot turned to Rafik. "You observed a shadow, yes? A figure following Idris?" Rafik nodded, trembling. "Yes. I saw them, but not clearly. Only their movements." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And that shadow believed the darkness would protect them. But darkness is never the ally of truth, monsieur. Only the careful observation of details, the little grey cells, can pierce it. The trap is set." Poirot's gaze shifted to Jonah Blythe. "You were near the jhonpri, yes? But not involved in the murders. Yet your knowledge of the mountain trails and the local gossip helped the murderer in their confidence." Jonah's face paled. I swear I had nothing to do with it." Poirot inclined his head. "I do not accuse you, Monsieur Blythe. You merely observed too well. The guilty party is less careful." The detective then turned to Clara. "You possess knowledge that could have placed you in danger, mademoiselle. The letters, the information about the honey, all gave motive to silence both Elias and Idris. But you acted with caution, restraint, and honesty. Courage, in fact." Clara's hands trembled. "Yes. I tried to prevent anyone from discovering it, but the truth—" "Ah, the truth," Poirot said softly, "is patient. And now, the final step. The reveal of the murderer." Poirot's gaze swept the room and then paused. The eyes of one person, hidden slightly behind a pillar, shifted nervously. A subtle twitch in the hand, the faintest blanch in the face. "You," Poirot said calmly. "Yes." "Monsieur Rafik, step forward." Rafik froze, fear and shock mingling on his face. Poirot continued, "You have observed much, yes. And your fear has been evident. But it is not fear alone that reveals the murderer, it is their own mistakes. Let us recount: the red scarf, the fragment of the lock, the altered footprints? Who had access, knowledge of the box, and a motive to prevent both Elias and Idris from revealing the truth? Rafik swallowed audibly. I don't understand. Precisely, Poirot said gently. You attempted to manipulate events from the shadows. You killed Idris after Elias's death to ensure the truth would remain hidden. The letters, the honey, the box, all pointed to ruin if discovered. And your impatience led to the fragment of the lock, the red thread, and the sloppy handling of the trail. You believed the fog and the mountains concealed you. But even the smallest clue can betray the cleverest. Rafik's hand shook. It was supposed to protect them. I didn't mean to. Poirot's eyes softened, though his voice remained firm. Your intentions were corrupted by fear and greed. A common tale, yes? The desire to control knowledge, to prevent exposure. And yet, even in darkness, the little grey cells reveal the truth. The final pieces. Poirot turned to the others. Idris attempted to reveal the truth. Clara's knowledge made her a silent participant by necessity. Jonah, though uninvolved, became a witness. And Elias's records, the wooden box, the letters, were the key. The murderer, blinded by desperation, did not foresee the careful observation of a patient detective. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. The red scarf, Monsieur Rafik, is not merely decoration. It was arrogance. A belief that style can disguise crime. But crime leaves marks, even in the mountains, even in fog. Every step, every thread, every misplaced object was a trace leading to you. Rafik sank into a chair, pale, hands trembling. I only wanted to protect them. I didn't know what else to do. Poirot's voice remained calm. And yet, you chose murder. Justice, however slow, finds its way. The aftermath. The villagers, initially shocked, murmured among themselves. Maria covered her mouth, tears in her eyes. Clara sat quietly, processing the revelation, while Jonah exhaled a long sigh, relieved of suspicion. Detective Farouk moved to restrain Rafik until authorities could arrive, all under Poirot's watchful eye. Poirot spoke softly, almost to himself, the mountains guard many secrets. But when human passion, fear, and greed intervene, even the heights cannot hide the truth. The little grey cells, patience, and careful observation, these are the true guides to justice. He turned to Clara, offering a reassuring smile. You, mademoiselle, acted with integrity. Courage and patience, these are qualities not everyone possesses. The world owes you gratitude for restraint in the face of peril. Clara's eyes shone with quiet relief. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. You saw the truth when no one else could. Poirot inclined his head. Ah, yes. The little grey cells always notice what the heart wishes to hide. And tonight, Hymor Edge can begin to breathe again. Outside, the mountains were quiet, but the fog lingered, whispering faint secrets of the past. Inside, the inn's hearth burned steadily, and the small group shared a sense of resolution. The murders, the secrets, the fear, all had found an end. Poirot sat back, fingers steepled once more, eyes reflective. The case was closed, the threads untangled, and the mountains, silent witnesses, had finally seen justice served. And somewhere, deep in the valleys and hills of Hymor Edge, the little grey cell smiled.